the European Union is far ahead of Australia, and I'm saying it as kind of like a wake-up call. Like, this thing is happening. AI is not going anywhere. It's not crypto. It's not the metaverse. So
It's not
deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and this is also, if there is a politician that is listening to this podcast, just deal with it. Okay. So it's not going away.
Hi everyone, welcome to the episode. It's great to be back. A new month, a new guest, and same energy. We're really excited to be here. Today we have a very interesting topic to cover off. And yeah, Renee, we also have merch, new merch.
Yes.
So
So we're super excited to introduce the new line, the new merch. So
yeah.
we've just designed our t-shirts, our first batch of t-shirts. This is more promotional, but the actual t-shirt that is meant for for you guys out there to wear it and represent What the Tech podcast, or actually What the Tech, which could turn out to be a brand. Full disclosure, I've actually trademarked the What the Tech so that it
Yeah.
becomes an actual brand on its own.
Yeah.
So watch this space.
Watch this space,
yes.
but hopefully you do like the look of the shirts,
Of
and
the shirts.
yeah, let us know your views on it as well.
Yeah, so they're gonna
Like
be
you
a few of those on, your favorite social media platforms. LinkedIn, actually, LinkedIn has become a bit social. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we allowed to post about the t-shirt on it. LinkedIn,
Instagram,
maybe we'll do some
yeah.
TikTok dance
Yes.
to put it on TikTok,
Why not?
and then Insta, and what else? I think we don't
Yeah.
have a Facebook page.
No.
Who uses Facebook these
Yeah,
days? anyway?
well, everything is under Facebook Meta, right?
Yes.
But anyways, so that's it for the merch, and yeah, we'll jump into the episode for today, and our guest Renee will introduce our guest for today.
Yeah, so I just have a few words. I'll let the guest introduce himself because he's a man of multiple talent. I've got to know him. Actually, there was a meetup I've attended, and he was one of the speaker, and I really liked what he spoke about, and I just wanted to introduce myself. And a few times I had some, in my world, I was thinking there's a chance that we could potentially work together, but that didn't happen. And the future will tell. Maybe we'll start working, but the fact that he's in today for the podcast is quite amazing, because I think that's probably like the beginning of a long-term partnership. Potentially, we're gonna be building some AI stuff together. So, but anyway, so today we have the amazing Gabriele, Gab.
Right.
Just to shorten the name.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, we're very pleased to have you. But introduce yourself to the guests and let them know everything that they need to know about you.
I mean, I don't like to talk about myself too much, so I have to say that probably it's not going to come across as the best introduction ever. But like you said, I'm Gab. In case you're wondering what my background is, I'm Italian. I migrated to Australia 10 years ago, married to a lovely Australian wife now.
Yes.
So we've been together for 11 years, and I mean, obviously I live in Melbourne, and my background, I'm an engineering. I have an engineering degree, mechanical engineer by trade. Always been passionate about IT stuff. You can call me like the average nerd that you would find everywhere. All right, so not that different from the common stereotype. I've always liked, obviously, programming, so I've started from C++. My mother used to teach Pascal, which is a super old functional programming
Super
language.
old.
So are actually still used by some banks, apparently,
Not
which
surprising.
is unbelievable.
Not
Yeah,
surprising.
just if you think about it. Yeah,
Mainframe, Pascal.
exactly.
Yeah.
Don't touch that code until it runs. Let it run.
Yeah.
Then I guess 7 to 8 years ago, I started actually exploring transformers, so which obviously now everybody thinks transformers are large language models, but in reality, large language models is just a subset of transformers.
Yep.
And transformers is just one of the many architectures, and specifically LLMs are autoregressive transformers. So I was kind of intrigued by this entire set of technology, what it could bring, and obviously at the time, and by at the time I mean 2017 when the paper came out, people didn't even know what a large language model was, and that wasn't, as a matter of fact. It was still in the inception days. and I started thinking, okay, maybe this technology at the time, maybe this technology can be useful. Now it seems obvious, but think about 8 years
Back
ago,
then,
it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then more or less from 8 to 5 years ago, I was just studying, exploring things, Jupyter notebooks all along, just mucking around with some code. And then 5 years ago, I started ToothfairyAI for two key reasons. One, I strongly believe, especially nowadays, that AI should be democratized as much as possible. So access to AI technology should be absolutely worldwide without any technological barrier, which is one problem, and also linguistic barriers, which is another problem. So, and this is why I started ToothFairy, and we still have it on the website. So we're still consistent with that long-term vision. So yeah, and
Awesome.
that's who I am.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
That's I think it's the best introduction we've ever had.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, don't tell the other ones. Yes.
And I love that you also articulated the purpose in the ToothfairyAI in terms of like why you started it and the problem that you were trying to solve. Because I think a lot of times founders sometimes don't get it so right because they don't know their why, perhaps, and they don't know maybe the problem that they're trying to solve. So that's great. So we'll jump straight into the questions. And obviously with your experience now, you mentioned that you're starting from 2017. Before it was all mainstream. You were really getting into it and very curious and interested in AI. So what would you say are the most significant trends when it comes to AI, both public and private sector in your experience, that are reshaping business operations across various functions within the organizations?
Yeah, okay, so I'll try to break it down a bit, but I'll start from what I've seen in terms of common business operations, and I'll try to make some differentiations between private and public. I mean, we work with both, but the common trend is that we start seeing, and I think Anthropic released a paper on Sonnet 3.7 recently that kind of discusses the same thing, like the same evidences. That there are some common use cases of AI models that are definitely outpacing many others that we thought were valuable, and probably they are, but they're still not applicable, if that makes sense. So the common trend is that large language models have been adopted at least for two mainstream use cases. One is basically coding efficiencies, and I'll call it coding efficiencies because one thing is that you want to build your own demo game using, I don't know, Grok 3. But reality is that businesses have obviously code bases that can be old and, they are not documented. There is no unit testing. There is no, coding automation of sort. CI/CD is kind of a dream.
Yeah.
And for these tasks, large language models, especially the state-of-the-art models, so even a 3.5 Sonnet or DeepSeek V3, have been extremely valuable, and they do a very, very good job. Again, here I'm not saying the level of accuracy 80%, 90%. I'm not benchmarking things, but definitely there is value in there.
Yeah.
And this is probably already 35-40% of the use cases that we've seen. The other 60%, I think, goes down one general category, which is a large language model having access to private information in the form of documentation. Some people have SharePoint, some people have just PDFs. They don't know what to do with them. APIs that can retrieve data from their systems, and somehow they want the large language models to perform reasoning activities or simply knowledge extraction activities. Some people call it knowledge surfacing activities.
Yes. Yeah.
These are by far the two most common use cases we've seen. And I think everything else, it's probably on the order of 5%, 3% in terms of how frequently we have seen these use cases. In terms of the difference between public and private, so public obviously have probably a bit more awareness that if something goes wrong, it can go really wrong. And if something goes well, no one is actually going there to cheer them up, to say, hey, you've done something fantastic, if that makes sense, because there is not much of a corporate...
this is not for profit, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So it's kind of like they can easily go into analysis paralysis, kind of saying, okay, you know what, let me not touch this stuff because in case the large language model says something wrong, then we are in big trouble.
Yeah.
However, they've also been the ones more aware of the potential risks but also understanding that there is the potential benefit of, for instance, giving access to knowledge to citizens, giving a better service. And this is the common use case we've seen with local councils that we work with quite a lot. While I stand on the private side of things, I've seen more and more, and it's perfectly fine. Like the conversation is, okay, how much of this investment that I'm making in AI is going to actually make an impact on my P&L? So like bottom line, is my EBITDA or whatever going to improve? And if so, how? And obviously, we don't like to partake into conversations of like, a workforce reduction and things like that. People use the word for what it isn't, but I'll call it for what it actually is. So workforce reduction. However, I'm also very happy to say that in general, I've seen all businesses not firing anyone, which is kind of like what people fear, simply letting them do other types of jobs, because I think you all know businesses have tons of problems and there is plenty of stuff that needs to be solved. So yeah, that's basically what I've seen in the market so far. Yeah,
that's interesting because I also because 2025 started off with last year was like AI awareness, and this year everyone just says it's agentic. So does the agentic vision or implementing AI agents will accelerate some of the use cases that you've mentioned being adopters, or would it take them to another level? Because it sounds like, if you think about even like knowledge management, right? So with an AI agent, they'll have the ability to be able to identify which knowledge source, which source of knowledge they need to tap into to surface that result back to the user, especially when you think about the different silos that exist within businesses. So so is there anything the fact that we are adopting slowly, or we're starting to consider AI agents as part integrated into businesses, will that accelerate or create new use cases?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, and probably it can go in many directions. How I'm gonna answer this, but I mean, I'll just zoom out for a little bit, and from me, that I have to look at almost from the outside, because for me it's very easy to go into the rabbit hole and knowing the intricacies. It's like, if you want to create a parallelism, 3 years ago, few people even thought that ChatGPT, which was at the time obviously the state-of-the-art large language model, could actually be useful for businesses, because everybody said, hey, it hallucinates, it makes stuff up, I'll never be able to use it with systems. Then after a year, businesses started realizing, and probably it's already late 2023 that I've observed this, okay, hang on a second, I can give this large language model knowledge about my business. I'm not talking about fine-tuning here, I'm talking about retrieval augmented generation, so RAG. And then they started seeing that it could be a bit more useful. But then, as naturally humans like to see things this way, I guess, what else can I do with it, right? So once you start understanding that, okay, I can actually ask questions about my knowledge, then the next step is, what can I do with this knowledge so that the agent not only gives me an answer that I still need to fact check anyway, based on my documentation, but actually gives me the answer and also the approach on how to tackle any given task that I give this large language model. And I think that from answering a question based on some internal documentation or internal knowledge to actually taking an action, that's where we moved from chatbots to agents. Which kind of gives you the line in the sand between the two. Because I mean, I've seen this word agentic spread around, like basically every single platform nowadays has agents. But agents are something quite different from a large language model. As a matter of fact, I don't think to an extent agents have nothing to do with a large language model. In a sense that it's like, you define a car by telling me how the pistons work. It's such a subset of what an agent requires that even creating the parallelism between, do you have the state-of-the-art large language model, which is equivalent to having the state-of-the-art agent? It's absolutely not the case. So I guess that this is where I'm seeing the market right now. And to finally answer the question, my definition of an agent is pretty simple. Is an agent that can accomplish tasks, not not a large language model that gives me answers on the documentation. These are very different things. And the magnitude of complexity when you deal with agents is significantly higher than having a large language model that retrieves some documentation. So it's a very interesting topic, and there is a lot of misconception and noise for obvious reasons. So
okay, sounds good.
And I think we've already started touching on the risks, like you mentioned before, where you said the public sector is more risk averse when it comes to trying out new things with AI. So what would you say are some of the strategies that you've seen them implementing to ensure trust, obviously from the citizen perspective, security, compliance, but also making sure that they're not too risk averse to, you know, the potential. There's a lot of potential in using the AI. So,
I mean, it's true. Like, look, first of all, like something that we stand for, and I think, Renee, you've seen it from the very beginning, is that we stand for privacy and transparency. And I want to stress that this is not necessarily a sales pitch. This is just how AI is supposed to be. Because if you do not have ownership and transparency over what the AI model is doing or thinking, can you tell me how you are running something without a risk? I mean, obviously you're running a risk. Like there is no in between. So in that sense, I believe that there is no other way to adopt AI safely, so reducing the risks, but adopting AI that is open source. And by open source, not because, again, we don't want to pay the researchers that do the work, we don't want to pay the people that pay for the GPUs. Of course, there must be still a commercial incentive for some organizations in doing so. But if you think about it, the risk of having an AI model that makes determinations, and the more capable they become, the more reliant you're going to be on them, the more you're going to be completely unaware of the thinking process. And at that point, you know, I know it can sound a bit dystopian, but we can already see it with customers. They are fact-checking less and less what the AI models say, because the AI models are getting better and better. But that doesn't say that the model is actually 100% accurate all the time. So you still fact-check. You know,
always check.
Exactly. So what we've seen, like in terms of reduction of risks, practically speaking, one, giving assurance to customers, and especially with local government, this is one of the things that we have done, I think, pretty well. Look, the model is yours. It's not ours. You can ask us to host the model if you like, because maybe you don't want to run your own VLLM stack on your orchestra, which is understandable. But at the same time, you have full control over the weights of the model, which is kind of like the matrices behind the model, kind of how the model is. And you can fine tune it. So you can make it your own. So you can customize it, which again makes sure that you can add some input to it. That's one. The second thing is that we always ask businesses to identify the first or two maximum POCs or use cases where they can see this technology adopted. It's very easy to say, well, AI can solve a lot of things. Yeah, guess what? Many things can solve lots of things, but still you need to prioritize what you solve every time, right? So, and this, believe it or not, is one of the most complicated things, because everyone in a business has always an idea of what the issue is, but then it's very hard to understand, okay, now, out of all the issues that we have,
what's the most important one?
Exactly. And obviously then what we try to help businesses with, saying, okay, is there something that AI agents can solve for you today? Or look, don't even try with AI agents, go somewhere else, because there are certain things that just AI agents are not good for. And this kind of helps because it reduces two things. One, the grind to get to a solution that you can actually give to employees or customers, in case you're talking about a public facing agent. So that then you reduce the time to delivery. And in a sense, there is no concern, oh my God, we've been working on this project for 12 months and look what we've done, nothing, we haven't released anything. The second thing is also that it's much easier to quantify what the business impact is when you start saying, okay, yeah, we have actually just used AI agents in this area, and look at the KPIs or whatever determination you want to make in terms of whether it was positive or negative for the business to adopt AI agents. And that again helps because it's easier for a board to approve one thing as opposed to a board saying, hey, with AI agents, we're going to revolutionize the entire business. Many people don't even know what you mean by saying we're going to revolutionize the business. Much easier to ask for an approval of an agent that does one specific thing one thing at a
Yes.
time.
And that they understand, like you said, the business impact. clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which, if you think about it, is absolutely common sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And there is nothing wrong with this. Even for me, it would be probably overwhelming, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of what we've seen
Yeah.
with businesses. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And that's quite interesting when you talk about open source. Can we dive a little bit more into that one?
Well, I mean, if you want to spend 3 hours on this, yeah, it's just the right
No,
person, but-
I think just to break it down for,
yeah.
because
Yeah,
remember, like the people
it's-
watching this podcast.
It's important, I think.
Yeah.
Because there is, again, a lot of noise and I gotta say corporate propaganda around this, and there are some misconceptions that is good that we eliminate. So first of all, AI as a field has historically always been open source. So it's not like, oh, now open source is trying to compete. No, actually closed source is trying to compete with the open source.
Yeah.
So just to give you an idea, the Transformers paper, that now, I mean, obviously now things have evolved a lot. So the new embedding methods, now there is also state space models that have come out. So different architectures even. But the Transformers paper was open source from Google Research in 2017. And no one was screaming, oh my God, we're giving away the secrets of the future of AI to China or whatever other country it is. It was just open source for everyone to read. This is just to give perspective, okay? Then, obviously, until 2022, all the models that have come out, and there have been Transformers-based models like Flan T5 and then Flan T5 XL, where the predecessors, very small predecessors, I must say, of ChatGPT. So being able to answer questions based on some context window that you provide, yeah? Now, you probably don't know about it. But again, that was open source too. So OpenAI changed the trend of open sourcing models because obviously they have their own business motivations, which is perfectly fine. So this is just to say open source is not a new thing. Okay,
Yeah.
one. Secondly, so open source is kind of a large category of models, but there are differences. So the key difference is like open weights, open dataset, and open weights generally, and just closed source. Okay, so essentially when you have an open weights model, and by open weights model, for instance, you have Llama, they are all open weights, and to an extent they have also released, especially with Llama 3, super detailed papers.
By the way, Llama 3, just for the
Sure.
viewers, it's just the LLM from Meta.
Yeah. So, and again, like they have obviously also the researchers there at Meta that were very optimistic about the fact that sharing this knowledge would have actually helped the entire community around it.
Yep.
So, and this is an example of open weights with also research paper attached to it. Another example of open weights and even probably more detailed paper is actually DeepSeek. So DeepSeek not only released the model open weights, not only released also the cookbook to literally regenerate the entire model from scratch, but they've also open sourced all the tools that they had to use to come up with DeepSeek V3 and DeepSeek R1 in the first place. So just to give you an idea, this is unprecedented because no other organization went down that road. And again, I'm trying to stress this point to say, are you really sure that we, I hate to say it this way, from the Western society, need to protect ourselves from people that might steal our ideas when the very same people that are supposed to steal our ideas are actually sharing with us their ideas. So
yeah.
I'm just saying, how does this even make sense, right? It doesn't make sense.
It sounds a little bit like the race to the moon.
It is.
Just a little bit.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
It is. And can you say that there must be one winner for the? I mean, if we get to the moon, I think we get to the moon as humanity. We don't get to the moon as one specific country. And I think the same thing should happen with AI. So there should not be a monopoly. There should not be even a duopoly. Actually, there should be multiple AI models that run as much as there are multiple societies, multiple cultures, multiple languages, multiple everything, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is to say open weights, and then open dataset, which is very rare, to be honest, nowadays, where you have the model, and at the same time you also have the training data that has been used to train the model.
Yeah.
So why the training data is important, despite the fact that I know that many people probably won't go into Hugging Face and will start checking what the dataset was, but it can kind of give you an idea of what the data sources were to train the large language model, which you can kind of use to inference whether there is going to be a bias towards something rather than something else. Closed source is the minority of AI. Closed source is the exception. The vast majority of AI models are open source.
Open source, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with the propaganda and the marketing that OpenAI, and I think even Anthropic models,
yeah.
So they're building these powerful models and they're keeping them closed source, but but it's not.
Dario Amodei, 3 weeks ago, more or less, basically when they announced DeepSeek R1,
Yes.
actually released on his blog, if I'm not mistaken, how important it is for America and its allies to actually have a monopoly, not around, I think, AI research. I don't think he meant that, but in terms of AI capabilities in general,
Yeah.
which kind of tells you that this is kind of the race to the moon. But I thought that after 50 years, we were a bit better than that. Because, realistically, you cannot stop AI research beyond, again, I hate to use this word, Western societies. I think it's actually silly even to think that way. So obviously, even if you look at the AI papers, more than 50%, I think, and this is my qualitative judgment, okay? More than 50% of the AI research papers come from China. So can you really believe that for some reason, and now I don't want to do Chinese propaganda, but just imagine the scenario. Yeah, because then people say, well, no, now you're having propaganda with China. But can you imagine a scenario where you have 50% of the research papers, but at the same time you don't deliver any state-of-the-art model? I mean, it doesn't add up, right? So if you have the research, something must be delivered.
Something must be delivered, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I see that I think is pretty silly. But it's they stay fundamentally the exception. And I think even Sam Altman in the last couple of weeks said that he thinks finally that they are on the wrong side of history. And obviously he was referencing the fact that they are logically not open source. And they've neglected the idea of having open source not as something that actually damages your business. I honestly believe that it actually improves your business.
Yeah.
Because not many businesses will actually host GPT-4, GPT-4o, or 1 or 3. But they also want to know
And make it accessible to a wide, because it's just
Exactly.
everyone's using them.
Needs to be
using
Exactly.
those also,
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think that leads on to the question of, from a technology standpoint, the challenges that enterprises face when integrating AI into their existing infrastructures. What are some of the emerging solutions that are helping them to address these issues?
Okay, so and this is kind of me now guessing what's going to happen. So there is a trend again that has come out ever since we realized that probably the models were. Sorry, I'll step back for a second. So the initial idea of more and more capable models was the scaling laws. So scaling laws is actually a paper that came out from Kaplan, I think, or Kaplan. Dario Amodei was one of the contributors to that paper in 2020, I think. Yeah, 2020 more or less. But anyway, what the scaling laws were saying, if you want more capable models, you basically need 3 things to go up at an exponential value. Parameters, data, compute. If you scale, and this is kind of like how you would say fate is. Like as a fate, I can say, if I scale these 3, empirically I can see that at the beginning, there is an exponential or a linear growth. At the beginning, exponential, then linear growth in terms of the capabilities of the model. But if I continue, then there is no reason to believe, there is no upper bound limit. This was, I want to stress, a belief system rather than a proper research paper. I'm gonna be very strong here because there were also many other research papers that were talking about the opposite, diminishing returns. So the more you scale, the less improvement you see.
Yeah.
Which
the
is
economies of AI, basically.
Yeah, and I want to stress this point. Why do you think NVIDIA currently has such a massive valuation? Not because they are selling more GPUs and they are making these phenomenal profits from GPUs, which is true, but it's not the point. The point is that people believe that NVIDIA will keep on selling more and more GPUs because of scaling laws, right? You want more capable AI models? Perfect. Just scale.
Yeah.
But DeepSeek and also the community in general have demonstrated that that's actually not the case. First of all, yes, there is the paper called Diminishing Returns. Unfortunately, I don't remember the author. I read it a couple of years ago. But essentially, this paper was claiming simply, hey, these scaling laws are not actually true. That's a simple fact. The second point is that there is a trend to go towards miniaturization of these models. Miniaturization at two levels. So one, it's what other people call model distillation, which I think is also what, by the way, actually they've disclosed that Llama 3.170B is actually a model distilled from Llama 3.1 405B. And 400, the parameters is basically the size of the model, I'll say brutally like that. So essentially the evidence is that you can teach a smaller model to learn trends from a larger model. That's basically the idea, which is kind of like, it's called distillation, okay? There are different ways of distillation. I'll try to keep it very high level right now. And then there is another trend, which is, and it can be combined, distillation and quantization. So with quantization, you basically lower the precision of the model. And essentially what the benefit is that you reduce the amount of computation that you need to predict the next token. In other words, it's kind of like you trade off a bit of quality to spit out words a bit faster, or simply allow your GPU that might be pretty small to run a relatively capable model. And to give you an example of how well combined these two things can be, I think you have seen what these long thinking models are, right? So obviously O1, because it's all over the news, and DeepSeek R1. So that basically they think first and then they produce the actual answer. Okay. So obviously there is a massive paper around it. I suggest everyone interested to just read the DeepSeek R1 paper, but fundamentally that's very interesting. Now, few people know that you can run, and it was actually part of their paper, Llama 3 70B distilled with DeepSeek R1. So you basically have Llama 3 70B as a base model that thinks like DeepSeek R1 would. So, but obviously Meta did not work with DeepSeek, right, on this, but essentially they've managed to teach Llama 3 70B how to think like DeepSeek R1. And this is the power of then quantization, distillation, when you can combine different sources literally to create your own recipe. And I think that that's where there is a lot of beauty in, what AI can be. And, once you empower businesses to use tools like this and you give them direct access to the models, obviously you reduce the risks of people getting hurt, at least in terms of branding of the business, or simply not delivering what's supposed to be.
So I just a follow-up question on that. So you spoke about how businesses can sort of like use those smaller models, using distillation and so on. And you also mentioned that, and it's quite obvious, there's so many AI LLM models out there. From an engineering standpoint, because now I want to tap into more of like the engineering part, where do you think the engineering implementation should be for those businesses, especially because the reason why I'm asking that is because you can have one idea that I've seen is to have like a middle layer where you have your application, and then that middle layer will just be routing to the most, I don't want to say probably like the more, not the efficient, but probably like the most appropriate LLMs. So whether you want to have an application that is requiring some sort of thinking, then the request will be routed to, like a DeepSeek. But you could have another application that probably require like a Mistral. Or we will just be relying on like a GPT 3.5, for instance, just to give the answer to the user. But then you've got that middle layer that essentially manage all the different routing the requests to those different LLMs. So from an engineering standpoint, is there anything that you've seen being implemented from that perspective, or anything else that?
If I can give a label to what you are saying, it's called prompt routing, and essentially is the
it's called
prompt routing.
Okay,
so essentially the idea behind it is to categorize, and you don't necessarily need to even use an LLM to categorize. You can use just a classification model that determines, going into the engineering world here, either you convert the prompt into an embedding, and then you compare that embedding to a series of, other embeddings that you have to see how distant that embedding is from what you categorize as a prompt that can be tackled by GPT 3.5 versus Mistral versus Llama. Or you just use a normal classifier where you classify the complexity or the skills needed to answer that question, and based on the skills you make a judgment on which model is more appropriate to do X versus Z. This is a pretty common, I'm going to say, at least among tech startups like mine, approach, because running top tiers models for any possible question is insane, and we simply don't have enough compute to even afford that. So logically, if you have a low thinking process, or at the very least like a straightforward answer to, hey, how are you? And believe it or not, there are many people on our website that even just ask these kind of questions. At that point, do you really need a top tier model to answer that question?
Yes.
While instead, if you have obviously complex math and things like that, we know that there are models that are more capable than others. If it can help also the audience, again, for the sake of open sourcing, I'm not sure if you know LMSys, but it's essentially, LMSys is the Arena bench, is powered by Hugging Face, if I'm not mistaken. They've recently released a section, sorry, I don't remember the name, but it's really new, where they
How do you spell that?
LMSys, so it's literally LMSYS.
Okay.
.org, and then you can see that there is an Arena benchmark. In that Arena benchmark, all the models get compared, and you have the different benchmarks. So like it could be human eval, which is coding, truthful QA, and all that. But they also created recently, and I'll describe it like this because I thought it was cool, like basically a pie chart showing how capable different models are based on exactly what you said. Let's say coding questions, so let's say general conversation, or math, science. Different models have different data set, different algorithms, and they have different skills. So with that tool that they've been kind enough to open source, you can already have an idea of how your prompting strategy could be, because then you see, okay, coding, this model is actually pretty good.
Model,
even we do, for instance, something, and again, because we need to keep our costs low, even for the customers, even if you use our product, you will see that, ToothFairy, you will see that we tend to use Qwen 32B to accomplish coding tasks, because we know that for what we need, it's more than enough. And it's a 32B model, like it's not state of the art or whatever, but it does one thing right. And this is kind of like, I think, a very good approach, because obviously you need to keep the cost low. Otherwise you're gonna go bankrupt pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think I actually didn't know about. I think I've seen charts about comparing different LLMs and what they're good at for different tasks.
Yeah.
But I actually didn't know that there was something called LMC. So I just googled it. It's
super cool. Yeah.
And I think it's great that there is a tool that can be used for benchmarking, because it allows businesses to make those very important decisions that impact cost of scaling. And so it's expanding a little bit more on the scaling part. So how can businesses scale effectively in terms of generative AI, and what are some of the bottlenecks that they need to overcome to drive success and obviously enterprise-wide adoption?
So I just want to point out the one thing with the benchmarks, because I also know that there is something called benchmark cheating, and I want to make sure that the audience knows. So obviously lots of LLMs, some of these benchmarks actually have open source data set as well. So some companies decide to overfit their model on the questions and answers of the benchmarks. So definitely
we've seen that in Kaggle competitions.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the cases, and there is a very well-known company that has actually completely cheated on the Kaggle on the Kaggle challenges. Absolutely, and it's probably the most well-known.
We don't mention names.
Yeah, but they cheated. They cheated 100%. So what I'm trying to say that is important for businesses, and this really goes into also the direction of how you can scale. Create your own benchmarks. Create your internal benchmarks. It's not that hard. Just put some questions, and you know what the answer is going to be, and benchmark the models, so the fine-tuned models on those benchmarks, which are yours. And of course, the large tech companies, including ourselves, would never know about those benchmarks. So that, but now I'll go back to your.
So when you say benchmark, you say in terms of specifically that business's requirements.
Yes. So you would ask
Very
a question that is specific to what the tech podcast, and you want to make sure that the model responds the way it's supposed to respond, without caring necessarily that it can be an Olympian mathematician. You know, I know it sounds silly, but literally you don't need that.
You don't need,
Yeah, you need a model that gives the answers, and it kind of builds confidence, right? That you say, okay, because the benchmark is getting better and better, I know that the model is getting better for my use
Fit
case.
for purpose, yeah.
Exactly. And you don't have to be concerned of interference from other data sets that have been used to train the model for other things that might impact your downstream task. That's kind of the idea.
So going back to the question.
Going back to the question, can you just repeat the question?
Oh, yeah.
got lost. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's actually making sense, and it leads on to the next question, which we'll touch on a bit later about regulation. So we were talking about scaling and how AI can be effectively scaled and the bottlenecks that need to be overcome.
So there is definitely a massive bottleneck that no one wants to talk about, because probably it's the harsh truth. There is not enough compute around to serve the entire planet.
Perfect.
In the sense of what some people claim, the AI revolutions, AI agents taking over the world, like all the employees getting fired, and then we're going to have this world of abundance, which are all things that, to be honest, any technical person would tell you this is complete BS. Okay. So the reality is that we don't have enough compute, and quite frankly, we don't have enough capable agents to even do what we are supposed to do in the next 5 to 10 years, even assuming that we have enough compute. So there are a couple of challenges that we have to work through. In terms of businesses, obviously the easiest way not to get into a bottleneck is generally not to have your own GPU cluster running in your own infrastructure, because that poses obviously big barriers in terms not only of adoption, because setting up your own GPU cluster is not necessarily very easy, not very cheap. Instead, it's a bit easier sometimes to rely on other providers, at least at the beginning of your experimentation, to not have all the investment. Then in terms of, what can happen next, obviously it depends on how power hungry your business is, right? So if you have to serve AI solutions for 100 users, most likely you will not end up in a bottleneck anytime soon, because again, serverless AI models are pretty available, and you can always use, and many people do, use multiple providers at the same time. So if Anthropic, for instance, in many cases, Anthropic can have a bit of a problem. In case you are into Sonnet 3.5, then you can say, okay, if Sonnet 3.5 is not available, I'm going to go to OpenAI, and I'm going to just fall back on GPT-4o. And people do follow these strategies, and it's perfectly fine. Like, it's just when you have compute available. But the real barrier comes when you start serving models in your own infrastructure. At that point, you need to be smart about it, because you cannot serve DeepSeek V3 full precision in your infrastructure unless you're talking of massive companies, right? So you need to start looking into Mixtral, MOE, so mixture of experts, which are a bit more memory efficient. So you need to find solutions around that. The short answer is it's a trade-off between how much thinking and reasoning you want, but at the same time, how many users you need to serve. Because like I said, there is not much compute available, especially here in Australia. It's pretty hard to get Hopper models, so the H100 or the Ampere the A100 models.
And I think, like, to your point, that's probably why some of the cloud vendors are, trying to position themselves as like, you can outsource your compute to within our cloud environment. But at the same time, like you said, the shortage of compute you've been felt with those cloud vendors. So I know for a fact that Claude 3.5 V2 only got available in Australia, AWS, like 3 weeks ago.
That's correct.
Which was already available in the US East one
for a while,
for like
day one, actually.
Yes, from day one, exactly. So you can see that even within those cloud vendors, they're facing that challenge.
Yes, and scaling also, they also face, I think, another big problem where even when you say Claude Sonnet 3.5 V2 is now available in Australia, in reality is not even true, like in a sense that you have cross-region availability. And by cross-region availability is a very nice way to say that your request can be routed to all regions that are part of the APAC area. So if you're talking about compliance, compliance and short experimentations using US-based or AWS-based models is actually a pretty hard thing to deal with, because when you start using these kind of third-party providers, you have to be clear on where your data goes, not only at rest but also in transit. And because obviously many people come to us because we offer, compared to others, we offer the hosting of the entire architecture, including the large language model, inside the infrastructure of the customer, right? So that kind of eases a bit the risks, because you host it yourself. But at the same time, they were asking, but also other providers say that we host it in your own region. But if you read through the fine print, there are two kind of problems. One, this cross availability, cross-region availability, which is something that especially AWS does because they don't have enough compute in Australia. And we know for a fact because we talk to them. But the second also large problem that we see is what we call monitoring, and there was another word that they use, safety and monitoring. I might use the wrong terms, but if you go on Azure, you will see this page that describes that even though the request might be handled by a server running in Australia, your data is going to still be reviewed for evaluation and monitoring purposes, I'm going to call it that way, by human evaluators that might not necessarily be in Australia. And also when we ask specifically, but what about the data replica? Because everything gets backed up in these cloud providers, right? Because they want high availability. Where is the data replica stored? They couldn't give us the answer. So that's why I'm saying, like, if you want to go compliant and you want to stay safe in terms of how your data is handled, you have to go through the grind of checking with each
every
provider.
Single step with every single
you have to.
Provider. So that leads into the question about obviously AI is evolving very quickly, and the cloud providers are trying to achieve everything that they're achieving within the parameters of regulation and the legalities of their customers. So what are some of the things that customers need to, or businesses need to consider when it comes to ensuring compliance, and also the ethical use of technology?
Well, look, in terms of compliance, I think that the European Union is far ahead of Australia, and I'm saying it as kind of like a wake-up call. Like, this thing is happening. AI is not going anywhere. It's not crypto. It's not the metaverse. So
it's not
deal with it. Okay. So, and this is also, if there is a politician that is listening to this podcast, just deal with it. Okay. So it's not going away. So compliance, I don't think it's an easy topic to tackle. I can give some of my ideas, which are not necessarily mine. I'm sure that I've read them somewhere and I'm just now manipulating them. But ultimately,
nothing is new under the sun.
Exactly. Let's put it this way. So I'm not going to say that I came up with these ideas right now. But one key thing is that there are two levels of kind of regulation and compliance that have to be put in place, I believe. One is the actual raw capability of the model. So like, the more a model is capable, the more obviously it needs to be under scrutiny. Why? Not because I'm against the people that build state-of-the-art models, more because we know that the more capable the model is, the more damage it can do, as much as it can do more good. Okay, so it's as simple as that. So it's simply more capable, right?
Yeah.
So, and when we talk about capable, my biggest concern is capable of manipulating people. I don't necessarily believe that you can ask a question to an LLM to find information that you cannot alternately find on the internet, and therefore this becomes a security risk for the nation or anything like that. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the problem. I think the problem is how easy it is for these models to manipulate people and shift people's opinions, decisions. That's right. That's where I think there is a risk. Again, this is my personal belief. This is not what the company stands for, but as an individual, I think that that's where the risk is. The second level is the use case itself. So if you plot it, so it's going to be like model capability on the y-axis, and then literally what the use case actually is. Because if you're talking about a use case where you're just trying to do protein folds and you have an extremely capable model, the level of risk of doing this, unless you're coming with the next biohazard weapon or whatever, it's pretty low, right? So you're literally just trying to do frontier science with the model. So make the model, in my opinion, as capable as you want, as long as your use case is for the greater good.
Yeah.
But if instead you're talking of a marketing agent that is supposed to shift people's opinion over specific products or whatever, and then the model becomes extremely capable, I'm not necessarily saying that everyone will fall for it, but clearly I can see more like a society risk around having this combination of very high capable model with kind of sensitive use cases. And this can go into even face recognition. This can go into people control, like if you are in a metro or something and they review exactly your body movement. So this is not necessarily just text-based. This could be vision-based or whatever. So this is where I see regulation needs to find the right trade-off between a combination of capability of models and use cases. Plot them and see where they fit on the diagram, like if that makes sense. And that can kind of give an idea of what should be regulated and what not. And by regulation, I don't mean, by the way, that they need to be closed source. By regulation, I mean that they need to be absolutely under scrutiny and they need to be as open source as possible. So everyone can dig into what these models are doing. The benchmarks have to be open source. That's what I mean. So it's not now a pitch for closed source. In terms then of where I personally think that there are, risks in relation to AI, I think that the risk is if we don't have enough society looking into this topic. Nothing that currently the AI industry that I'm part of is doing cannot be solved and cannot be mitigated as a risk. I mean, bloody hell, we mitigated nuclear weapons, okay? We mitigated mutual assurance of mutual destruction. What I'm saying is, like, we mitigated significant societal risks, okay? There is nothing that we can do to mitigate this risk too. But again, this is not going to go away, and I don't believe that there is enough attention on this topic in this country to actually make sure that companies and local governments and governments, state entities, have a real good framework to decipher whether their use case, the model that they want to use, the solution that they want to adopt is safe or not. And this is where I think there is a bit of work that needs to be done there.
Yeah, so it's as if there's a need for, and I'm sure it probably exists or not, like some sort of commission, AI commission or something like that. Because I know the company I work for, we have an AI governance team, we have a safety team, and within those we have people who are pretty much aware of what AI can do, right? So they don't need to be data scientists or machine learning people, but they need to have that understanding and be able to ask the right questions when we pitch an idea of building an AI, a new AI tool, or use cases. So that's what we're already doing at a micro level. So now if you want to implement that at a macro level, it's probably going to be, we'll need to have a bit more people, like yourself, getting involved in these kind of conversations, because it's just more about asking the right questions than necessarily actually going in there, because when you ask the right questions, you prompting people to be able to disclose, and the more there's more transparency, the better.
Like a large language model, really, if you prompt it correctly, you get generally better answers.
That's right. Yes. Another topic too that we can dive into if we have time.
So with what I get from that is, with greater power comes greater responsibility, and I think it's very necessary and relevant when you're dealing with society, and like you said, being able to almost control people, the way people make their decision-making process. I think it's very important. Well, we've almost come to the end. I think we just have probably one last question in terms of looking at agentic AI systems, and how they fit into the systems, and how they fit into the bigger picture of enterprise automation. What impacts might they have on streamlining operations across functions or departments?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this thing is relevant or not, but I think it's important, first of all, for organizations that say, we want to do AI agents, that I want to stress to understand what an AI agent is.
Yes.
That's very important. I mean, the way companies are adopting AI, for the vast majority of the cases that I've seen, have nothing to do with agentic frameworks. And again, frankly speaking, businesses are not necessarily ready for agents, because developing agents means that you leave a significant degree of autonomy to an artificial system.
Yeah.
So that's what it literally means. Okay,
Yeah.
so in terms of, you know, how businesses can effectively adopt these kind of solutions and what agentic frameworks can do, I'll try to give an example of what, in my opinion, an agentic solution is, and maybe with this we can follow on in terms of questions. Like, let's say that I want not a sales rep in this case, just a customer service officer that provides assistance to customers. A customer comes to me and maybe jumps on the website, asks a question to what you would call the chatbot, but in the area behind the scenes there is an agent. This agent receives a question, provides some sort of answers. After that, the customer replies saying, hey, can you please send me an email telling me exactly what I need to do? The agent takes the action, sends the email. The agent then replies back on the email as a new channel back to the customer and reports as it's going through this conversation with the customer on a ticketing system or a CRM system, whatever you need to do to make sure that then you keep track of the flow or the journey going on with that customer, whether it's for assistance, whether it's for sales, whether it's for marketing, for whatever. And this agent then can use tooling systems, can use APIs, can use internet search, can use reasoning on a variety of channels autonomously. That's an agent.
Yes.
Yeah.
So everything else, it's glorified AI workflows, chatbots, but they're not agents.
They're not agents,
So
yeah.
now with this description that I've just given, can you honestly tell me how many businesses are actually ready to embrace something like this?
Well, the previous episode we had our guest Mon Mary, who spoke about the concept of AI teammates.
Yep.
So it seems like, so what you're describing is, you know, within the, you know, customer service or call center, whatever, just dealing with
retail,
you know, retail, or I mean, dealing with customers in general, but extending, and she might think that I might not be explaining properly, but my understanding of the teammates concept is you have, you know, different agents that are being built for different departments. So
Correct.
you can have a risk agent.
Correct.
You can have, you know, like a legal agent.
Correct.
You know, and you have like all of them for like every department, and they can, based on a specific request, either within the business or from customers, those agents can interactively, you know, come up or provide an answer based on the knowledge that they have, the tools that they have access to, you know, and the many other flavors that you need to provide to that agent to be able to perform the task. So
Perfect. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like to use the word swarm of agents.
Yeah.
So literally, you don't have necessarily 2-3 people looking at one problem, but you might have 20 people, 20 agents looking at the same problem, critiquing each other, kind of like in an antagonistic fashion, but just to critique and review what they do.
Yep.
Actually, something that we do, which is pretty good, and to be honest, we've received probably the most success out of this, is what we call planner agents, Jarvis, which is Jarvis is just a name to one planner agent, but essentially the idea is that you have a task. That task can be broken down in multiple steps, because again, obviously many things that we do in life are not necessarily one shot. You know, you need to go through a multi-step iteration. So plan, then the ability to reason over each step that you need to execute to get to a goal. So you must have like short-term goals and long-term goals, because you might be doing something right now because you want to accomplish something maybe in 3 hours time.
Yeah.
And the ability to have multiple agents that, one, contribute to one another, but also pick the right agents for the right task, right? Because you might have a project, but then in a project you might have IT developers, and on the other hand, you might have a project manager, but they do completely different things.
Yeah.
Still, you need to orchestrate them. So
Yes.
agent orchestration plus agent swarm, I guess, are two concepts that will be that kind of go along with the teammates. Although in the case of the teammates, there is kind of like sometimes the incentive in having teams that work in silos because they can just control exactly what they're doing. But instead, with agents, it's actually better to have this kind of swarming exercise where you can have different point of views, I guess, to resolve a task. So that's actually that's I think exactly where the market is going to go. Again, I think that
at least from specifically for enterprises.
Yes, I would assume so. Although, again, I want to stress that even starting from like what I call always like the low-hanging fruit, which is like having this kind of knowledge surfacing capabilities, so being able to automate more without necessarily paying for the next Zapier kind of solution or something like that, you gain already a lot of benefits without necessarily breaking the bank. And then you can build on top. Also because, we need to realize that, yes, okay, we are in this field and we are comfortable talking about agents, talking about agentic frameworks, talking about LLMs, but 99% of the business people actually are not, they are not into this world. So we need to give them time to literally learn, what dealing with an agent is, and then naturally they will build their own knowledge to then say, okay, yeah, we can do more. And then we create that kind of environment. But throwing agentic frameworks into businesses, I think is kind of like a suicide, and it kind of misses the purpose. Really, because it can be a bit overwhelming, I think.
I mean, it's a pretty challenging space if you want implementing AI agents, and then on top of that, how do you even create the user interaction with it? Are you just building just like a tool that produce result and people just take it and do whatever, or they're interacting, almost like real time with those agents to get the outcome they're looking for? So anyway, so those are things that I'm just saying is pretty challenging at the moment.
And I think that even people, to be honest, expect, and again, like obviously we see many people asking questions to our public agent that is on our website. They ask all sorts of things, and it kind of suggests that, at the beginning there is the wow factor because you can generate an article, right, with just one prompt. But now people are asking much more complicated stuff, like, can you generate an Excel spreadsheet with my report, given that I've given you this data? Or can you generate an image that represents the solar system?
Given that you have to go and collect the data from SQL Server, whatever.
I mean, and people, I think, started realizing, hang on a second, I can ask it to generate some text, but can it actually do something even more specific for me? And I think that this is something that we are already witnessing. Like, for instance, in ToothFairy, you, again, using several agents or just the planner agents, you can generate actual documents. You can generate docx, PowerPoints, Excel spreadsheets. You will be amazed by some of because sometimes people ask us, hey, how can I do this? Like some significant use cases, like without disclosing the customer, just imagine that you receive like 50 or 60 questions to apply for something. And you want the agent to reply to these 60 questions in an Excel spreadsheet, updating the spreadsheet, sending the email, making it sound like you actually replied to that email, replying to all the questions based on internal knowledge that you have inside your system.
Wow.
So up until 6 months ago, this would have been, okay, incredible, ridiculous, right? But now we start seeing customers that come to us with this kind of requirements, which I think it's a good sign, because it means that, okay, yeah, I can do X, but then I can do X plus. And
I guess it shows their confidence in what they can achieve.
That's right. That's right. Like I've given you this example, but I could give you many more like this. Which I think it's a good thing. And again, this is not, I'm losing my job or whatever. This is tedious stuff that, to be honest, no one in that business wanted to do. And, they're just being more productive. That's simply what it is. Another case that I can share, which is pretty interesting, is like rebuilding an entire website built. And again, I'm going to use the WordPress and Elementor. I'm not a fan of these two technologies, but again, call me whatever you want. I mean, I'm a developer. I'd like to build it from scratch. And they said, we want to regenerate our entire website, taking screenshots of the website through an AI agent, so that then in the future, we can just ask the agent, hey, go on WordPress and make changes to my website. That's pretty cool, like if you think about it. And again, these are things that if you were to ask, no way, 12 months ago, no way you can do something like this, right? No way, you can generate some code, but you can't deploy to WordPress automatically, right? But this is the power of tooling, that you can access different things. So I think that it will just naturally evolve in this direction, because generating just the answer is not enough. Obviously, you need to get something done, you know, and that's what people expect. Like, okay, thank you for the answer, get it done. And we're moving to the get it done phase now. I think it's 100%. Pretty clear.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think that was pretty awesome episode. Feel free to say a few words about Tooth Fairy and maybe where people can find you and so on. But this is now your slot.
My stage.
Your slot to the Tooth Fairy slot.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I guess that, I hope that, whoever listened to this podcast appreciates that. I think it's pretty clear what the vision, my vision at the very least, is. And I think that resonates with what the company does. So we are all for transparency, democratization, ownership of models, being able to customize agents around your business, not providing agents that run your business, if that makes sense, which is not the idea. Obviously, we're pretty active on LinkedIn. I think everybody appreciates that we always post from time to time. We're not very spammy, so don't worry. Even if you follow our page, like we post probably once every 2 weeks.
I follow the pages. I've never feel overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, it was just sometimes. Yeah, we post some stuff just to keep people in the loop. And so obviously, if you jump on our website, you can just use the contact us form. We reply in less than 24 hours anyway. Happy to schedule a demo and then set up something to show you what AI agents actually are, as opposed to other things, I guess. And otherwise connect with us on LinkedIn. Happy either ways.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks so much, Gab. It was great having you. And I think we could have continued the conversation. Like you said, we can have a 5-hour conversation, but this is a great taster for the audience. And hopefully they will slide into your DMs and have more questions for you.
Thank you so much for actually hosting me, guys. I really appreciated the time that you
spent
with me.
And hopefully this is not the last time we're having you. Hopefully we're going to be more and more in the future. Maybe we can have a dedicated one now for Tooth Fairy.
No worries. No worries. Not at all.
Yes, awesome. All right.
Thank you.
With that, we're done with our episode. And like we said, feel free to always reach out to us. There's some really cool stuff that are being, plotted or like that are in the pipeline. More of that. I think the next episode will be announcing those things. But with that, we're done. Thank you very much, everyone.
See you soon.
See you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.